Victoria met her future husband when she was 11 years old. No one could have imagined that this childhood sympathy would eventually turn into a real feeling that ended in a marriage of love. But only a happy wedding did not guarantee the princess an easy life in a foreign land, especially when it came to the union with the heir to the throne. Victoria Adelaide was born in the fall of 1840 in London. She became the firstborn son of British Queen Victoria and her husband, German Prince Albert. At home, the little girl was affectionately nicknamed Vikki. Later the girl had 8 brothers and sisters. Since childhood, the princess adored her father and he answered her in the same way. Vikki received an excellent education. She spoke fluent German and French, read Greek and Latin. She was taught arithmetic, history and philosophy. Teachers noted the girl's remarkable ability to learn as well as her stubborn temperament. Subsequently, the princess was considered one of the smartest women of her time. In 1851 in London was held the World Exhibition of Science, which arrived Prince Wilhelm, younger brother of Prussian King Frederick William IV. The prince came with his son, 20-year-old Friedrich. Queen Victoria decided to introduce Friedrich to her daughter, entrusting Vikki to give the young man a tour of the exhibition. Charming Vikki successfully coped with the task, despite her young age of 11. The energetic and sociable girl was so fluent in German that she made a lasting impression on the good-natured Friedrich. This meeting left a deep imprint on the prince's memory, who, in addition, appreciated Prince Albert's liberal views and the warm relations in his family. It all seemed so opposite to the formal German court where he had spent his early years. After the prince returned to Germany, he began an active communication with Vikki by letters and a real friendship developed between them. The prince, also possessing an excellent education, graduated from the University of Bonn and received military training. He quickly learned of Vikki's intellectual prowess and reading ability. 4 years later, Friedrich visited England again to meet the girl who had grown up. He remembered their first acquaintance well and wished to meet the princess again, perhaps to propose to her. The Prussian court did not at all support the prince in his romantic thoughts. The House of Hohenzollern wanted Friedrich to marry one of the Russian Grand Duchesses, as the Prussian king's own sister was Alexandra Fyodorovna, wife of the Russian Emperor Nicholas I. But a marriage alliance with hostile Great Britain was considered undesirable. Yet the prince managed to secure the consent of his uncle Friedrich Wilhelm IV to the proposed engagement to a British princess. When Frederick came to London, the princess was 14 years old. Despite Vikki's pretty appearance in portraits, she was not considered a beauty at the English court. She was very small growth, 150 centimeters, so her mother feared that her daughter would have difficulties with grooms. But all this turned out to be trifles for the prince. The whole court immediately noticed the mutual sympathy between Vikki and Friedrich, which was impossible to hide. They literally glowed being near each other. The prince was so happy that he was not deceived in his sympathy by correspondence, that 3 days after their meeting made Vikki a proposal. And she immediately told him yes. Queen Victoria and her husband gave their consent to the couple's engagement in May 1855, putting Friedrich on the condition that their daughter would marry only when she turned 17. Prince Albert hoped with sincere hope that his daughter would influence liberal reforms in Germany. Interestingly, this engagement announcement caused outrage not only in German society but also among the British. However, the young people in love remained indifferent to public opinion and the disapproval of politicians in both countries. Naturally, the Prussian court thought that the wedding should take place in Berlin. But Queen Victoria insisted that the wedding take place in London, which caused additional negativity in Germany. In January 1858, the couple's lavish wedding took place. Vikki was 17 years old and her fiancé was 26. This marriage turned out to be a happy one. The couple was strongly attached to each other all their lives. Princess Victoria had to face a difficult environment in Berlin. There was a strong anti-British sentiment in the country, and she was met far from warmly. The princess's actions and deeds caused discontent on the part of the Prussian courtiers, who perceived many of her steps in a critical light. Interestingly, she was referred to at court as that English girl, despite the fact that her father and maternal grandmother were true Germans. The princess was greatly disappointed by the negative relations in the royal family. In her letters to her sister, she noted that intrigue and scandal reigned constantly and the air was saturated with envy. Victoria was allocated an extremely modest content from the Prussian court, and she had to support herself and her husband at the expense of her dowry, which caused resentment of the British royal family. The princess maintained an active correspondence with her parents, who tried to constantly influence their daughter, persuading her to follow British interests in the new country. 4,000 letters between Victoria and her mother have been preserved. In 1859, Victoria had her first son, William II. Unfortunately, the labor was difficult due to the breech presentation of the fetus. Medics still managed to save both the princess and the boy. But as a result of the doctor's ineptitude, the child suffered serious damage to his shoulder joint and neck. As a result, Wilhelm had one arm poorly developed and was shorter than the other by 15 centimeters, which he was embarrassed about all his life. The boy also had congenital torticollis, which was later corrected by surgery, and outbursts of uncontrollable anger. Because of the heir's health problems, his parents worried a lot, especially Victoria, who blamed herself for having a sick child. But Victoria's subsequent births went without difficulties. The couple had a total of 8 children, 4 daughters and 4 sons. Of these, 6 lived to adulthood. In 1861, King Frederick William IV died. Since he had no children, his brother Wilhelm I, Friedrich's father, became the new king of Prussia. Frederick and Victoria were now heirs to the throne and crown princes. At the end of the same year, Victoria's much-loved father Prince Albert died. Together with her husband, she traveled to Great Britain for his funeral. Meanwhile, the crown princess was still disliked at court, believing that she had too much influence over Frederick. Victoria was accused of revealing confidential information of the Prussian court to the British. In addition, Victoria did not have a relationship with her mother-in-law Augusta Maria, who condemned her daughter-in-law for her democratic views and disapproved of literally every step of the crown princess. The couple lived in Berlin in the winter, and in the summer they retired to a country estate in Potsdam. The crown princess tried to bring up her youngest children by herself, which was frowned upon by both her mother-in-law and her own mother, who considered it bliss. Both royal ladies believed that Victoria should leave the younger children to governesses as well as the older ones. The crown princess's relationship with her 3 older children was far from ideal, as Victoria was demanding and strict in their upbringing. She constantly exercised control over their activities. However, with the younger children she behaved more loyally, giving them more freedom. In 1866 and 1879, 2 of her sons passed away due to illness, which was a severe blow to Victoria. The heir couple became an object of unpopularity in the country because of their devotion to all things English and their frequent trips to Great Britain. Victoria and Frederick had liberal views that often surprised their contemporaries. For example, they opposed anti-Semitism, despite the fact that Jews were distrusted in Germany at the time, especially in the army and among the nobility. Victoria wrote that she felt ashamed of her adopted country because the leaders of the anti-Semitic movement, Stoker and Treitschke, behave with such hatred toward people of another faith and another race, who have become an integral part and by no means the worst of our nation. Kaiser and his court. John C.G. Roll. Despite this, the couple actively pursued German interests during the wars against Austria, Denmark and France. During the military conflicts that rocked the country, Friedrich served in the Prussian army while Victoria was attentive to charity. She founded several hospitals for soldiers, schools for nurses and girls, but all their efforts were in vain. Public opinion remained the same and she was still considered an outsider. And even her eagerness to get involved in charitable projects was seen as a sham by the courtiers. Plus, Victoria had a strained relationship with German Chancellor Bismarck, who felt she was negatively influencing her mild-mannered husband. In the spring of 1888, King Wilhelm I ascended the throne of Prussia after the death of Frederick III. However, Friedrich's term on the throne was extremely short, only 3 months. By this time, Friedrich had developed cancer of the larynx, which was due to long-term smoking. His life ended in June 1888, when he was only 56 years old. Empress Victoria outlived her husband by 13 years. Friedrich's death left her deeply saddened, and for the rest of her days Victoria kept mourning for her beloved spouse. Victoria's eldest son William II became the new Kaiser. Victoria had a cool relationship with her son as he did not understand his parents' liberal views and always condemned them. Wilhelm is infamous for the fact that during his reign Germany declared war on Russia in 1914 and he became the last emperor of the German Empire. Victoria disagreed with her son's political views and constantly criticized him. The Kaiser even wanted his mother to leave the country for good. Therefore, Victoria left the palace and settled in the town of Kronberg, where she built herself a castle in the style of an English manor, which she named after her husband Friedrich. In the last years of her life she devoted much time to her hobby of painting. She walked, read and corresponded with her family. All of Victoria's children married and almost all left offspring. Dowager Empress died in 1901 from cancer. She was 60 years old.